Good afternoon. My name's Chris, and what I'm going to be doing today is installing a Takegawa um, tachometer and speedometer onto my 2000 Monkey before I do a big bore kit, so that I have a little more information available to me from the dash. Here is the unit, and this is what I'm going to do today. Good afternoon. I am going to be installing this Takegawa clutch or Takegawa speedometer on my 2000 Monkey to replace the original dash. Just something with the tachometer, a little more information. My plan is to make this a big bore kit bike, and so I'm going to want a little more information than comes on the stock dash. So this is me installing this. I'll hit the high points, and if I had any problems, I'll talk about those. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take off the headlight bucket. There's 2 screws here. There's an adjustment for the headlight on the bottom that you don't have to do. And while we're here, I'm going to replace this tiny little horn with a freeway blaster. It's a little more of a louder horn, and it makes a difference for people hearing you in traffic. So I'm going to take these 2 screws out and then take this horn off, and then we'll come back. Okay, so I've removed these 2 screws here and here, and then that creates the ability to kind of pull the bucket back. You've got a connector here, which I'm going to undo, and then there are 2 bolts that hold the headlight bucket on. A lot of times what you have to do is let the blinkers, unplug the blinkers and let those wires come out in order to gain enough access to this area. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull this. These 2 screws have already been pulled off, and then I'm going to see how far back I can get this at in order to gain access to the stock speedometer. Okay, before you get the bucket off, you take these 2 bolts out. There's also a 10mm bolt that has to come off, and this is really one of the main securing points for the bucket, so that comes out as well, and that frees the bucket up. There's typically on the wiring harness on the back, there's like a little clip, this little clip here that holds the wiring harness, so you kind of push that back through. That gives you a little more freedom as well, and then you can get access to the bucket. So we have that 10mm bolt out, the 2 side bolts, and you can see that gives us a little more freedom. I'm going to again push this through so that I can gain access, and you see that I have pretty good movement. The blinkers sometimes create a restriction. Sometimes it's the main harness is just a little too close. You can just unplug things. Typically there's only one place for these things to plug in the headlight bucket back in, and so if I need to unplug something, it's usually pretty self-evident where that plug goes when I go to put it back together. Like I just undid that, and it gives me a little more freedom. See, the main things are the 2 that are holding it up or holding access up is the 2 blinkers, and they're easily labeled. One's kind of one color and the other's orange. I think this one is blue or green, and so that allows that to come through and out of the bucket. I guess you could leave them attached, but it's not a big deal to just pull the plug. So 2 wires each on each of these blinkers, and then I can pull this much farther. I can pull those wires out, and it just gives me more room to get through the back to the back of this harness and my working space here. Here I've taken the bucket off, which is not necessary, but there are a couple clippies that tie into the bucket, so just remember where those clippies go, and when you put it back, you wire this stuff back through the bucket. You'll just clip that back in, keeps everything nice and tidy. There's 1 screw here that pulls this off, and then there's some bolts under here, or screws, I can't remember, that hold the gauge in place. I'm going to get the mileage so I can convert that to kilometers, and be able to put that onto the new speedometer. Okay, I'm going to install the little switch that comes with the multimeter dash. It's a remote switch as opposed to a regular just on the gauge switch. So for whatever reason, that's the way they chose to do this. It comes with a little plastic strip which you need, and I'm just going to mount it down here kind of out of the way. I could mount it up here close to that. I'm about to put some hand guards on, and I may ultimately move that, but for now I'm just going to stick it here, thinking I'm probably not going to change the settings very often as I'm riding. So here's the Takegawa cluster. You can see it's plugged in, and you've got 4 connectors in this kind of very heavily or long rubber boot. One goes to the main Grom harness or monkey harness, and the other 3 are for sensors. One's for the switch, one's for the thermotemp, and then one is for the tach signal. Well, here's the switch installed, and what I've done is just put it right next to the mounting points here. I'll probably put some risers on a little later, but for now it's going to live there. I may move that up to be closer. I could put it right there if I wanted to, and it would be easy to access. I'll see how it goes. If I decide to change it, I'm not cutting wire, so there'll be plenty of wire to do that. Here's the instructions. I printed these in English and read them over yesterday, but I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on here. Here's a main harness. It plugs into the tach. Then there is a tach signal pickup wire that goes to the coil, which I imagine is under the tank. There is a wire that goes to the switch, and then there's a wire that goes to a thermoprobe that you can put in the oil sender. If you get a special bolt from Takegawa, it allows you to put that thermoprobe in that oil bolt, and gives you an idea of how hot your oil is getting. So I'm going to do that and then see where I can figure out what's going on here. Here's the back of the speedometer. That's the connector. There's a little press tab there that you use to be able to pull the connector off. Press that tab and it comes right off. Side cover comes off. You just basically put the key in, turn the switch, and that loosens it. You've got 3 grommets, a couple grommets that are holding it in place, and then it just comes off. So that's pretty easy. This is a little concerning, the burn there. I mean, something got hot, but at this point I'm not terribly worried about it because the bike runs well. I'm gonna see if I can find that coil. I think it's in here somewhere, maybe tucked up under the tank. I'll follow the spark plug wire back to it. That's usually the easiest way to find it, and really the only way I ever do it. Anyway, yeah, so we got the side cover off. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then start disassembling that airbox. Here we have the harness. What I've done is kind of rolled that sleeve back a little bit, and I'm pushing it back. It makes it where I can put that main harness together. Then I'll roll it forward, and they want you to kind of tape that up really well. I've got some silicone tape coming, which is tape that kind of seals to itself, and so I'm going to use that to kind of fortify the connection against water. 8 bolts. That comes off. This is just a stock Honda filter, so 1 bolt that'll come off, and then it looks like the mounting point for this is up here on top. I may have to take the tank off in order to remove that, or I may be able to squeeze by. I'm not sure. We'll see here in a second. That stock airbox came off pretty nice. There was a clamp that you need to loosen, and then 1 bolt on this side, I think 2 bolts on the other side, and that allows you to pull the stock air intake off, which I'll be replacing. While I was over here, I noted that the coil's right here, so super easy access. I'm gonna work out where my wire routing goes on that, and then find out where the plug is on that second one, read through those instructions, and see where I need to plug that in. So here's the Takegawa cluster. We can see it's plugged in, and you've got 4 connectors in this kind of very heavily or long rubber boot. One goes to the main Grom harness or monkey harness, and the other 3 are for sensors. One's for the switch, one's for the thermotemp, and then one is for the tach signal. So after I've taken off these 2 side covers, and they're held on by a single screw, and then you kind of have a couple little clips that hold them in place. Took those off, and I'm thinking while I'm in here, I have a man in the box intake that I'm going to install as part of the upgrades I'm doing to this. So I'm going to just go ahead and install that while I'm at it, coinciding with this project. So yeah, we'll go from there. So these 2 screws that hold everything to the bike as far as the cluster are actually Allen head. I'm using a 3/16, which is I think a little off, probably a metric, but find one that's the right size and use it to take them off. Okay, that is the connection, and you can see I rolled the sleeve over the original Honda sleeve. That's pretty tight, and then I'm going to come around later with some silicone tape and fortify that connection. Plugging up all the wires, one is pretty easy, which is the they're all color coded, so like gray plug to gray plug, and white plug to white plug, and bullet connector to bullet connector. So that's pretty easy. You get 2 options on the, I think is the temperature gauge. There's one with this connector, which is what I'm going to start with, and then the others with the thermoprobe. And so this is the one that goes into that bolt. I don't have that bolt, so I can't really use this. I may run it with this first and see what kind of information I get, and then do some reading, see if I want to swap it out. So while I'm in here, I'm going to put this highway blaster or freeway blaster horn in. You can tell it's a little bigger than stock when we compare the 2. And it's quite a bit louder. I typically put these on all the motorcycles I buy just because I like a little louder horn. And it's a pretty straightforward plug and play kind of deal normally. You might have to wallow a hole out or something. I'm going to use the stock bracket mounting location and the stock wires and just put it right there. It's aesthetically, I'll point the horn down. It is what it is, and I'll show it after it's done, but from a safety perspective, it does give you a nice louder horn instead of a meep meep kind of horn. I found some English instructions, and it turns out I put the wrong plug on. This one is for the wideband sensor if you have that, and I don't have that on this bike. And so what I'm going to do is take this off and replace it with the other, and then kind of zip it down closer to the place where it's going to eventually live. I'll find a nice route for it and zip tie it. So we're going to go through the setup on this Takegawa, and I'm going to go through the basic settings. To get into computer mode there, setup mode, you'd press those 2 buttons on your little remote. And you can move up and down by pressing the up button or the down button. These are I'm just going to walk through each of these basically. The first is the set your time and date. If you want to set the time and date, I think you press both buttons, or maybe you press the bottom button for a little bit, and then it pops you over and you can work through your way through that. I just changed it to, it is 8:15, and then up, Odo. I set that when I did that. I don't know this power test. I don't understand that, and I haven't done anything with that yet. That'll be something I'll learn later. If I had the AFR function, the fuel function, that's how I would do that. The fuel type for the Monkey is a 390 ohm. That seems to work. The pulse is a 0.5 and a high act. If you want to, when you first start running this thing, you can get it to learn your gear set by getting into the mode where you tell it, I want to start to learn, and then it asks you to shift up and down, or up actually, through the gears that you have. When you get to the fifth gear, because the Monkey's a four gear only motorcycle, then what you do is slow down, and the computer interprets that as there are no more gears, and then you learn that. The sensor is 31p and 710 millimeters for the tire circumference. When I first set that up, I had the tire circumference much larger, and I ended up showing a very high speed, so very, very high, like 130 miles an hour when I was just cruising around in second, so that was kind of interesting. Temp sensor, that comes on steady. For overspeed, it's off. If the temp gets too high, it'll start flashing like that. ABS function, I don't have ABS on this bike. An oil reset at 600 miles, and then low fuel warning, voltage, temp set, and a high flash if I get to 8,500, steady if I go to 9. Overspeed at 103, which I'm never going to be on this bike, and then speed warning display is off. Brightness for day and night, and then mile an hour in Fahrenheit, because that's what we use in the United States, and then back to the clock. So that is how you set up the Takegawa speedometer.